Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We are with Liberty Lass, our level 35 brute, who has 177,000 XP to go to get to level 36. So that might happen this episode or maybe next. We're working on the story arc Mass Duplicity, which is about the Nemesis, and we're looking for a prototype. And Lisa Colbert, or Colbert, who we've been working with and tried to rescue and stuff, she cracked the code of Nemesis, and they found a lab over in Craze Folly where they're assembling their prototype. So now we got to go to Craze Folly. So let's see, the easiest way to do that will be to, we can just go right here to our base, and then we'll go to Craze Folly through the super base transporter. Not sure where it's going to dump us. I don't think I've been to Craze Folly with this character, so I'm not sure where it's going to dump us. It'll be interesting to see. Probably the most annoying place for a mission in Craze Folly is all the way the other side of the zone. When you start on one side and you end up having to go all the way across it. But with Flight it's not so bad because you can't really aggro anything. So let's go to Craze Folly. Let's see where it dumps us. Oh, actually in a pretty good spot. Why would you put a base portal here? That is a weird location for a base portal, but okay. I guess toward the middle so that you can get equidistant to anywhere. And of course over there is the Richty War Zone if you want to go there. In the old days, when this was called the Richty Crash Site, the only way to get to it was to go all the way through Craze Folly. I remember going in there, I think it was there or here, one of the places. I think it was there, looking for Richty. It was almost always empty, and I went in there just soloing Richty when I was like level 41 or something, just to like gain XP. So, we have 2 clues to find. I don't think this is the final episode of the story arc, but we'll see. I don't remember this one that well. It's not like Bonefire where I know it pretty well, and even there sometimes I don't remember like which one we're doing. Oh, and you know one of the arcs I don't think we did with this character that I need to go back and do a flashback is Frostfire. The Hollow stuff. I'm not sure it offered me Frostfire. I think I'm going to have to do the original starter one and then eventually build my way into Frostfire, I guess. Okay, so there's nobody in either place. Let's go ahead and complete this part of the map. So people were talking about which maps they liked and which maps they don't. So some people, I guess, don't like the labs because they can have multiple elevators on the same level going to different levels. And those can be a little annoying, particularly if you forget which one you did last, right? And so you know accidentally go up the same one twice, which is not that big of a deal, but is a little bit annoying. Sorry if you hear noise. I think the garbage men are coming and collecting garbage outside my window. Let me pause it here a little bit until they go away. Alright, we are back, and hopefully we won't hear any more objectionable noises. So let's see, we have to head down here. Yeah. Trying to figure out like which room I'm in. I see now. You usually don't enter the room from above there. You usually enter it from down there. Depending on maps, of course. So one of the things I actually wanted to talk about today is something Luke Hart talked about in his most recent video. It's called the GM's Worst Nightmare, or the DM's Worst Nightmare. And I'm going to have to do some disagreeing with Luke. I don't like disagreeing with him, but in this particular matter, I guess I'm going to have to. What he talked about, don't know it's the worst nightmare. I think somebody in the comments posted the actual worst nightmare, which is that you have a group of people and somebody can't make it, and you say, okay, we'll play without the person, and the rest of the group says, nah, let's just skip and we'll play next time. And the next time somebody else can't make it, and the next time somebody else can't make it, and you end up not playing for a year because you can never get a full group together. That's the real worst nightmare, and I think that person has it right. That's probably the worst. Luke's example of the bad nightmare, the worst nightmare, is, you know, at the end of session 1, or whatever, at the end of last week's session, their players had a couple of options, right? Given the information they had, they could either go to the Dungeons of Dread or the Crystal Palace. And they talked about it both in and out of character, and they decided, and told the GM they decided, and agreed with each other that they had decided, that they're going to go to the Dungeons of Dread. And so the GM, knowing that the players next week intend to go to the Dungeon of Dread, prepared. And the map, the monsters, the treasure, the NPCs, the town near the dungeon, all of it. And the players show up for next week's session, and the dungeon's got all the maps and everything ready for the Dungeon of Dread, and all his notes and the write-up and everything. And the players say, you know what, we changed our mind. Let's go to the Crystal Palace instead. And Luke said, after you get done panicking, what do you do? And he said one of the options that you could have is you could say, no, I'm sorry guys, you agreed to go to the Dungeon of Dread. I prepared the Dungeon of Dread. At least for this week, you're going to need to go to the Dungeon of Dread. If you want to go to the Crystal Palace next week, we can do that, but you're going to have to stick to what you said you're going to do. But he said, I don't recommend that. He said he doesn't recommend it, right? Because now you're railroading the players. You're kind of forcing them to do something, right? You're taking their choice away from them. So my first disagreement with Luke is, no, you're not taking their choice away from them. The players had a choice. Last session, by the way, I pulled that guy so he wouldn't juice anybody in this room. Last session, when you guys were wrapping up, you gave them a choice of where to go. You can go to the Dungeon of Dread, or you can go to the Crystal Palace. And they considered their options, and they chose to go to the Dungeon of Dread. That was their choice. You didn't take the choice away from them. If they had chosen to go to the Dungeon of Dread in the middle of the session, and had actually gone to the Dungeon of Dread before the end of the session, that wouldn't be taking their choice away, right? And now they're in the Dungeon of Dread. Presumably they're going to continue it. And the only difference between doing it in the middle of the session and at the end of a session and starting the actual trip to the Dungeon of Dread the next session is you had to do a session break, because time is finite and you ran out of time to continue the session. Right? Is this everybody? Because we have to defeat all here. So that's one of my questions is, would the reaction of the players be different if it had happened mid-session instead of in between sessions? And the answer is probably yes, right? They wouldn't walk into the Dungeon of Dread during the session and then after they entered it say, let's leave. The only reason they're able to change their mind, they feel free to change their minds, is because they've had a whole time in between sessions, and since they're starting something at the beginning of the session, they feel like, oh, well, we can go ahead and change it, right? So one of my disagreements with Luke is, no, this isn't taking choice away from the players. They already made a choice, right? It's like me. I already made a choice to be on this story arc, right? I shouldn't complain now that I'm on the story arc. Now, maybe I don't like the story arc once I'm on it. Sure, maybe you go into the Dungeon of Dread and after you run a few rooms, you say, you know what, this thing is way higher level than we thought and we maybe should be more powerful. Let's retreat. And next session, go to the Crystal Palace first. Okay, that's fine, right? But to just say at the beginning of the session, oh, we changed our mind, that's almost like you're gaslighting the GM. One of the people in the comments said he thinks his players used to do this all the time, and he said he thought they were doing it deliberately. I don't know if they ever said they were. He thought they were doing it deliberately, and the reason he thought they were doing it deliberately was he thought they were doing it to try and make the adventures easier. That they thought that if he prepared for the adventure, it would be harder than if they forced him to pull something out of his butt, right? But that, again, to me suggests that there's a disconnect. There's a problem in communication and problem with the group. If the players feel like the GM is... If they're trying to get the GM to improvise so that things will be easier, then that must mean that the players feel like the missions, the adventures, the challenges have been a little too hard. Well, if you think that way, the right reaction is to sit down with the game master outside of the session and say, Bill or Sally or whoever the GM is, I feel like you're making these missions really hard and maybe a little too hard. Is there some way you can maybe ease up on us a little bit? Somebody actually talked about this on Reddit or something, and they were saying that things were too hard, and I guess after some questioning by the other posters, it turned out what the players were saying is that every single battle, every one was like skin of their teeth, battle to the death, people went down and whatever. And they said, can't there be some battles where we just kind of win kind of easily? You know, it doesn't have to be a walkover, but does every single battle have to be a nail biter where, you know, like my best friend, well, not my best friend, but my other best friend, the good Rob, he always felt like the ideal champions battle was one where every villain is down and there's one hero left up and he's got one stun left. Right? And he literally wanted every battle to be like that. That was exciting to him. There were others of us who didn't really feel that it was necessary to have every battle be that close. And so as a GM, I had some battles that close and some battles that weren't, because I knew not everybody wanted it to be that much of a nail biter all the time. Right? So if you feel like your GM is making things too hard and it isn't fun for you, or for other reasons it isn't fun for you, the right thing to do is to confer with the GM. Tell the GM what's going on. Right? It's not to say I'm going to tell the GM I'm going to go to the Dungeon of Dread and then trick him because we're really intending to go to the Crystal Palace, but we don't want the GM to have time to prepare the Crystal Palace because it'll be too hard. Right? That's not the right way to do it. Another thing I'm going to respectfully disagree with Luke about, and again, that was a commenter that said this, and I'm just saying, like, if the reason the players are sort of changing their mind on the GM is to try and throw the GM off balance because the GM is doing things that are too difficult for them, you need to talk to the GM. Don't keep throwing the GM off balance. That's just rude. Somebody shooting at me. So let's talk about the other sort of excuse that Luke gives for this, allowing this behavior as a GM and not complaining about it or telling them that they have to stick to it, right? And that is, well, the GM has to improvise all the time, right? And so, you know, it's not like this is the only time you have to improvise. Just deal with it. I fundamentally disagree with this, and I'll tell you why. I think this is enabling bad faith player behavior. The players know what the GM does. Unless they're completely new to the game, they know the GM takes hours and hours to prepare stuff, right? Unless your GM has told you, I don't prep, in which case, you know, do whatever you want, right? But if you're playing, like my players have always known, it cannot escape them that I prep, because I've always got nice maps for them, which they know takes time. Often maps I made myself. Everything is kind of prepared and ready in advance, and they were often very impressed. Who did I miss? They told me they were very impressed with how sometimes they did things that they didn't think I could possibly have expected, and yet I always seem to have something ready. That's because I heavily prepare. And I'm not saying that during a session players can't sort of come up with new evidence that changes their mind and makes them think of doing something different. Where is the last person? Is this a bug? Because I'm not seeing any red arrows. Oh, I know where we probably missed. I didn't go up here. Yep. I wonder why they're not red arrows, though. So... Is that a Tyrolor? There is. So... The thing is, yes, GMs need to be able to come up with stuff on the fly, and yes, sometimes players do things, a lot of times players do things you don't expect. Often that's the fun of GMing, them doing things you didn't expect. But that's coming up with an expected solution to the problem that I set, not forcing me to abandon all of the problems and stuff I created and do a bunch of stuff I haven't created. This is a totally different thing. What players who are acting this way are doing. Hang on, let's call this guy and then we'll continue. It looks like they already assembled the battle suit. We got to go get it. We're going to take on a false nemesis. Yes. Well, if you knew about false nemesis, how come the other guy later is going to not know about them? So we're going to just go back to the base and go to Paris Park. So here's what's happening. When the players say we want to go to the Dungeon of Dread, they tell the GM, absolutely, that's where we're going to go. And then when they show up at the next session, they say, actually, no, we want to go to the Crystal Palace, which we know you didn't prepare. Right? And then saying, oh, well, the GM should be ready to improvise. This is like the Peanuts. Charlie Brown he was a place kicker on the little Pee-wee football team. And Lucy was the place kick holder. She held the ball. And every time they practiced, every time Charlie Brown went to kick the ball, Lucy would pull the ball away from him just as he went to kick, and he would fall down and hurt himself. And every single time, she would say to him, I won't do it this time. And then she would do it anyway. Right? And imagine Lucy, after doing this a bunch of times, and Charlie Brown finally takes her to task over it, saying, but Charlie Brown, what I'm doing is helping you prepare for adversity. After all, in a real game, there's an opposing team that's going to be trying to block your kick. There is a home crowd, and we're the visiting team, and they're going to be cheering and trying to interfere with you. There might be wind and rain and sleet and snow and weird, muddy conditions on the field, and you have to deal with all of that. And yes, he does have to deal with all of that. But none of that has anything to do with pulling the ball away from him, right? Lucy is pulling the ball away from Charlie Brown to be cruel, and then using the fact that there's other types of adversity that he might have to face to justify it, right? Not that Lucy ever justified it in the actual cartoon, just in our example here. And what the players are doing is exactly the same thing. If they're saying, we're going to go to this thing and let you prepare it, and then they say, oh, psych, we're not, we're going somewhere else. Right? It's abusive. It's cruel to the GM, and you know it's cruel. Right? Because even if the GM is good at thinking on his feet and doing stuff that weren't prepared, right? That wasn't prepared, you've still made the GM spend all this time and potentially get really excited about going to the Dungeons of Dread. And now you're saying, psych, now we're not going to do that. That's literally like Lucy pulling the ball away from Charlie Brown. Psych, you're kicking thin air. Sucka. Right? This is not the relationship you want to have with your GM. You should not be purposely making your GM do work that you know is a waste of their time. And then you get all the what do you want to call it? The apologists, all the people defending this, saying, oh, well, you can reskin it or you can use it in a later session. That's not the point. Of course you can reskin it or use it in a later session someday. But the players should not be deliberately telling the GM to prepare one thing and then saying, now we want to go do something else. It's abusive. It's Lucy pulling the football away. And no, it is not fair to say, well, GMs have to improvise all the time. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And if, as a GM, if I had a bunch of players who regularly did this on purpose, or seemingly on purpose, I would already have asked who wants to GM. I don't want to do this. Because it's not right. Right? My own players in my Deadlands game may have mentioned this in an earlier episode, but as of the time of this recording, we're about a week and a half out of the next session. We're doing the Blood Drive, which is a campaign that, as it turns out, isn't that great. I've tried to make it better. When we talked about what campaign to do, I put on the table all of the possible campaigns that I could bring them through. Here are the... Nope, false nemesis over there. Here are the ideas that I have for campaigns. Right. And idea number 1 is Blood Drive, and I described what it was like. And idea number 2 is this, and idea number 3 is that. Right? And one of the things I made them aware of when we described the Blood Drive is I said to them, oh, look at that. He didn't turn intangible because I disoriented him. And we're finished with the story arc, and we got 47 reward merits. That's not bad. Let's finish up these guys here. I said to them, if you want to go on the Blood Drive, right, the premise of this drive is that you're on a cattle drive going from Texas to Wyoming, right? And you can't just decide to get off of it in the middle, because then we're out of the campaign. There's no content in this. I pulled the book up. I held it in front of the camera. I flipped through it without them showing them the pages. I said there are 9 chapters, and it takes us from Texas to Wyoming, and then there's some stuff in Wyoming at the end, right? Don't want to spoil it, but that's the premise. If you guys choose to do this, if you go off the blood drive, you're going out of the campaign. So don't pick this unless you want to stay on the drive, right? That's the premise, and there's no getting off the drive once we get on it. So make sure you want to do it. I didn't force them to do the blood drive. I warned them what the blood drive was like and said, don't choose it if you're, don't make up characters who the first time there's trouble are going to want to leave the cattle drive, because once we're on it, you kind of can't. I said the only thing we can do is say we're done with the campaign and start a new one, but we can't run the campaign and not be on the blood drive, because that's not how it works. Okay? Now, even so, I still gave them some choices along the way. I sensed that it wasn't that great of a campaign. I still don't think it is. I've done what I can to make it better and make it more enjoyable to my group, and I think I've been somewhat successful. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I would certainly not give this campaign my highest ranking of the campaigns that I've run. It's okay, but not the best I've been able to do. And a lot of it has been me wrestling with, and we've leveled up. A lot of it has been me wrestling with the content to try and get it into a form that I feel like will be fun to run and fun for them to play. So as we were going through it, I definitely have gotten the sense that my best friend isn't enjoying his character. And I wasn't sure everybody else was enjoying it either. And we had a period where like somebody was missing almost every session, and it happened a lot more than usual. And so I thought, okay, maybe these guys aren't having fun. So unfortunately, my best friend wasn't there. He missed the session. He was sick the week I asked about this. But I said, do you guys want to stay on the drive? If you want to get off, I have a way to get you off. And if you want to change characters, I have a way to change characters. And basically, I took the idea that Jordan Case-Carolman had in the Deadlands Wildcards game. And in that game, there is a 5th Reckoner, a 5th horseman, as it were, called Chaos. And so I created my own version of Chaos, the big sister. In the Wildcards game, it was a male character. This is a female character named Chaos. She has a different name as well. And she is the big sister of the other Reckoners. And even they don't want her out of hell because she's so scary. And she brings the characters into the hunting grounds and makes them an offer, which I presume they will reject. And then another character from the Wildcards game called Wolf That Leaps Through Fire, who is like a Native American shaman / warrior, was going to kind of come and bail them out and say go and get them home. And then I could teleport them anywhere I want. And I could bring any characters into it that I want, because that's the power that Chaos has. So each of the characters they wanted to play was going to walk through a door into their bedroom or into a casino or a saloon or on a train going from the dining car back to their club car or whatever, and end up in the hunting grounds and be there together and offered by Chaos, and then they would all get out together in whatever location they wanted to go to, anywhere in the West, right? So I talked to them about it, and I said, do you guys want to make a change? Now, they said no. If they had said yes, it wasn't going to happen that session. I was going to say, okay, next session we will do that. I will prep it, right? I had semi-prepped it. And if they had wanted to do it really badly, I probably could have run it that session, although we never would have done it without my best friend present, because we wouldn't have known which character he wanted to play. But when I ask questions like, do you guys want to keep doing this? It's never for, we're going to change it right now in 5 minutes. It's always for, in 2 weeks when we have our next session, I will prepare the other thing you want to do. So I asked them then. I asked them when they got to Denver, do you guys want to stay on the blood drive or take a train somewhere else? Because there's a bunch of railroads at Denver. They said, we want to stay. Right? Now they're about to reach Dirtwater, which is chapter 7 of the 9 chapters. And the book says they can stop in Dirtwater, take their pay, and leave Bill Sutter, who's the head of the cattle, right, who owns the ranch, or they can stay in his employ and deal with the things in Dirtwater. And that's the choice I gave them last week. Do you want to stay in Dirtwater and continue the blood drive? And 2 or 3 of them are like, yeah, we really want to do it. My best friend doesn't seem to care about it. I don't think he likes it that much. But he didn't say no, right? So even though they agreed to this permanent 9-chapter campaign, and I told them, if you pick this campaign, we're on it till the end, at least until chapter 7, right? All along the way, I have said, do you guys want to back out now? Right? Realizing they might not be enjoying it. And they've all said, we want to stay. Okay? But I've never said to them, do you want to back out now and we'll change this session? It's always been the context of, I can eventually get you out of it, but not this week. Because this week I prepared for this thing that we're in the middle of. Right? And so, I think as a matter of courtesy to the GM, you have to come up with choices ahead of time. In fact, they reminded me. I said something about, do you guys want to stay on it or not? You can think about it. And one of them said, this is your spring break, right? Because I had posted in the Discord, and I said, yeah. And he said, well, let's make a decision now so that you have time over spring break to work on what we decide. Right? And it's a lot less work that they stayed on it because I already have that prepared, semi-prepared. I still have to work on chapter 8, and I'm going to do that actually later today. But the point I'm making is, when you tell the GM what you want to do from next session, right, and you know that in between sessions the GM is going to work on that thing, to then come back and at the beginning of the session, not partway through the week, right, not like now, with 10 days to go, they all get together in Discord and say, you know what, we had a private talk, Scrapper, and we actually all decided we don't want to stay in the blood drive, and we're not going to stay in Dirtwater. Okay, I still have a week to work on something, but to show up at 10:30 in the morning when we start and say, you know what, I've changed my mind. I don't want to stay in Dirtwater. And none of the rest of us do either. That is, like, I could, yes, as a GM, I can roll with that. I can deal with it, but I shouldn't have to. You already, in response to my request, told me what you wanted to do, and you know I prepared it. Right? And I think that's the problem, is that when you change your mind like that, you know you're messing with the GM. And you shouldn't do that. The GM is supposed to be your friend. Okay, let's slot up. We are finishing Barrage and Energy Punch, and we're adding another slot to Willpower. We have one more level to go before we will buy some SOs, and then we will, if we don't have the right recipes, we can fill in those powers. It looks like we have one damage invention. We're not hiding anything, are we? Okay. Yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of recipes, it seems like, lately. I feel like I was getting a lot more before. Well, I think what I'm doing is getting more set drops. So let's go ahead and make the damage. Now, of course, I could use, I have plenty of influence. I could buy stuff here. But we're only doing the ones we own. So let's create a damage. And we will go ahead and slap that on there. So we've now 6 slotted and completely updated this power. Unfortunately, we don't have the accuracies to fill in here either. You can definitely see what drops more, right? We have some accuracy here, but we have a lot of damages. And we have a bunch of endurance reducers and rechargers. Those seem to drop the most. But we don't have heals. We have a few heals. We don't have any endurance recovery. We've not had a single one of those drop, have we? We've had endurance reduction. We've had resist damage. These are level 40s. Recharge reduction. Do we need that on anything? I don't think so. Nope. Energy Punch needs a damage on it. Alright, so it looks like we're doing pretty well. Oh, this damage, yeah, we could technically put this in here. Yeah, why not for now? So now we've 6-slotted everything up to there. We don't need 6 slots in here, so the next job is to start working on Total Focus. So level 37, we will finish High Pain Tolerance, and we will add 2 slots of Total Focus, and we'll put Endurance and an Accuracy on it. And then probably level 39 we'll triple slot and finish it up for damage. We'll see. Don't have anything that we need to do in here, so that's good. And we can upgrade. We will upgrade at level 37. We could upgrade the SOs right now to level 39, but what's the point? We'll just upgrade them to level 40 when we get to level 37. And I think, guys, this is a good place to stop. Yeah, I want to say, when you're playing a game like D&D or Champions or any other tabletop role-playing game, and you know that your game master is working really hard to prep things, it is rude, unfriendly, and abusive to tell them to prep one thing, and then when you show up at the session, say, nah, we're going to do something else. Right? I don't care if the GM's supposed to be able to roll with that. He or she shouldn't have to. You should be a better friend and a better player than that. And I know if we showed up in a week and a half, and we started the session, and at the very beginning of the session, let's say they were supposed to get to Dirtwater, they're going to get to Dirtwater probably at the end of the session. So if they change their mind about staying in Dirtwater, I don't care, right? Because I'll prepare stuff. They'll get to Dirtwater. If they say, you know what, now that we're in Dirtwater and we see what it's like, we don't like it, let's go on to Headstone Hill or something. Okay, fine, I'll just pull that out and start doing that one. But let's say they had finished everything and they would arrive, like they were just about to arrive in Dirtwater at the end of last session. And so they get to Dirtwater at the beginning of the session, and like right when the session opens, one of the players says, you know what, screw Dirtwater, I want to go to Headstone Hill right now. We're just going to take the train and go over there. That's, I guarantee you the other 3 players would call them on it and say, wait a minute, you told Scrapper that you wanted to play in Dirtwater. And you know that Scrapper spent his spring break working on Dirtwater. This is rude. We can go to Headstone Hill another time. Let's play in Dirtwater this week. Right? The other players wouldn't go along. As by the way, except for one, all the other players have been GMs. And they know what it's like. Right now, not every GM preps the way I do, but I'm a heavy prepper because I'm not a great improviser. And somebody said, oh, this is good, you should learn to do, you have to improvise as a GM. No, you don't. You can very heavily prepare, and then, like, what I'm doing when I improvise is I'm improvising off of what I've already written. Right? Versus just completely making stuff up. Right? Yeah, I can kind of improvise Headstone Hill because I've already read through the campaign, and I could pull the book out and start flipping through it right now. Right? But if you're going to go to a city like Tombstone, Arizona that I've never prepared, and I don't know anything about, and I've got one little paragraph in the book about, no, I'm not going to have a bunch of NPCs ready for you. I work on that stuff offline. I get it all ready to go. I at least make a list of NPCs with a little bit of a motivation, a goal, and a personality trait, so that I have something to work with for everybody in the town. Not everybody, but like all of the shop owners and the sheriff and stuff like that. Usually I use a town that, like Coffin Rock or Dirtwater or Headstone Hill, that's already been detailed by the publisher, and I can just read through it and use the characters there, right? But if you just randomly go to some town that I don't have prepared, I'm not great at improvising that stuff. And that's one of my limitations as a GM. And I would say to somebody, well, you should be better at it, and if you're not, you're a bad GM. Okay, you GM. Right? Because nobody else in the group wants to game master. Then you're going to have to deal with my strengths and weaknesses. And my strengths are preparing and having really well thought out story elements, and the villains always have good motivations, and the story always makes sense, and I'm pretty good at making up mysteries that my players are interested in, and because I do a lot of preparing, the mystery solution always makes sense, right? And they like that. That's my strength. Making up good NPCs, running good battles, making up good maps that are interesting to fight on, those are my strengths. Those have always been my strengths, going all the way back to champions. My weakness is randomly making up crap off the top of my head that I didn't prepare at all. Knowing that as a player, you shouldn't say, too bad, you have to randomly make up crap. We're not going to do what we said we were going to do. All right, now again, I don't mind if my players get to Dirtwater an hour and a half, 2 hours into our session, look around and say, you know what, we don't like Dirtwater, it's kind of a boring town. Now that we're here and we see it and we see what adventures are possible, we're really not all that interested in it. We'd really rather go to Headstone Hill. I'd say, okay, let's, in this session, we just saw a truck run over a car over there. In this session, get on your horses. Let's do shopping if you need to do shopping. Let's pick whatever horse out of the remuda you're going to keep for yourself, because they have a group of 5 or 6 horses each. Say your farewells. If somebody's changing characters, let's introduce that character. And we'll leave the session. You're on your way to Headstone Hill, and then I'll take 2 weeks to prepare it, and you can come to it next session. Right? But you don't start the session saying we're going to skip the thing you prepared and go to the thing we know you didn't. That's rude. And I don't care if a GM should be able to handle it. The player shouldn't make you handle it. And as a player, you shouldn't do it. Right? Again, maybe a kicker should learn how to deal with a ball that's yanked away from his foot, because sometimes when you're kicking off the stand on a kickoff, right, the little thing that holds the ball, the wind blows it, right? But remember, when the wind starts blowing it, they don't make you kick it while it's blowing. They call in a holder and the person holds it, because it's not expected for the kicker to have to kick a moving ball. And you might say, hey, it would improve your skills to kick a moving ball, and if the player wants to try that, fine. But to say, I won't move the ball and then yank it out of the way, and that's literally what you're doing. We won't switch to Crystal Palace and then yank it out of the way and go ahead and say we want to go to Crystal Palace. That's doing the same thing that Lucy's doing, right? So, you know, don't gaslight your GM. Don't think that you're somehow doing them a favor by forcing them to learn how to improv. Let the GM do what's comfortable for them. And if the GM asks you ahead of time, please tell me what you want to do so I can prepare it, be honest. Tell them what you want to do, or her, and then do it. And as a player, if you see, well, this isn't a lot of fun, I thought the Dungeon of Dread was going to be fun, but it's not. Okay, do the Dungeon of Dread this session, and then ask the GM to switch it next session. Yes, you can do that. It's okay. You don't have to be whimsical and flighty and say, half hour in, oh, we changed our mind, we're going somewhere else. And the other thing Luke said was, oh, well, maybe it's not fun. Okay, well, you didn't know if it was going to be fun until you started it anyway. And by the time you figure out it's not fun, you're halfway through the session. So you may as well just eat it for this session. And tell the GM it's not fun and ask him to do something else, and he'll do something else for you next session. Right? Anyway, that's my rant. I wasn't planning to do a big rant today, but yeah, I actually made several comments in the comments section. I normally don't make a lot of comments with Luke, but I made several comments disagreeing with Luke and some of the other posters, because this whole idea that, oh, it's just GM's job to improvise, it's not your job to improvise on the lies of what the players are telling you they wanted you to do. That's on them. And as a good player, you shouldn't be doing that to your GM. Right? Somebody in the comments actually said the GM is part of the group and is playing the game too. And it's not the GM's job to just cater to all the whims of the players and make them happy and himself miserable. I'm not the waiter serving you at your table. Right? I cooked the meal, but I'm sitting here eating it too. And if you told me to cook, you know, roast beef and mashed potatoes, and I spend all day preparing it, and then you sit it down and say, I don't like roast beef and mashed potatoes, I'd rather have turkey and stuffing, you really shouldn't be doing that to your host, just like you shouldn't be doing that sort of thing to your GM. That's enough of that rant. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.